Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more.
Yes, she exclaimed with a delighted squeal, rereading the letter for the second time. Finally, it pays to be the last of the line. Madeline Stone, at 22, was a brunette with a knack for dreaming up big ideas but lacked the ambition or motivation to make them a reality. She was attractive in a shy, unassuming way, with a bubbly and likable personality. However, her social skills were lacking, which often left her spending Friday and Saturday nights alone, either watching TV or, on rare occasions, renting a tape for her VCR. Her insecurities had held her back in the corporate world, always overlooked when it came to promotions and too shy to make waves. Currently, she worked in the mailroom of a large department store. It didn't pay much, but it kept her busy. Her insecurity was understandable. After her parents and brother passed in a car accident 7 years ago. She had been left to navigate the grief alone. For a long time, she had regretted skipping the family trip to the movies that night, choosing instead to sleep over at her friend Amy's house. Had she gone, she likely would have perished with her family. Amy had been a source of support through the years, and they remained best friends. Now, a letter she had barely dared to dream for had arrived. Ms. Stone, it is with great regret that I inform you of the death of your great-uncle Joseph. He passed away at the age of 90 last Friday, October 11th. As you know, your great-uncle was a man of many means and a great philanthropist. He will truly be missed by those who knew him and were helped by him. It is my duty to inform you that, as the last surviving member of the Stone family, you have been prominently mentioned in Mr. Stone's will. In fact, you have been named the sole beneficiary. To that end, I humbly ask that you present yourself on Wednesday, October 16th at 2 p.m. at my office in Salem for the reading of his will. If this time is inconvenient, please contact me prior to then. Sincerely, George Robbie, Attorney at Law. Maddie could hardly believe it. This was her chance to finally get ahead. She didn't know much about her great-uncle, except that he was extremely wealthy. He rarely interacted with her at family gatherings, but he had always been fond of her late brother, often telling him stories about their family's noble bloodline. After the tragedy, she had only seen him once, at the funeral, where he barely acknowledged her. The only moment that stuck with her was when he suddenly appeared after the service, took her by the shoulders, and stared at her, his face inches from hers. He stared for what felt like an uncomfortably long time, before nodding as if reaching a conclusion, patting her on the back, and saying, "Courage, Maddie," before walking away. Maddie didn't like to dwell on those memories, but now, with his passing and the unexpected letter, she found herself recalling that strange encounter. She thought about it, but couldn't make sense of it, so she dismissed it as the eccentricity of a rich man and rushed to call Amy to share the news of her good fortune. The following day at work was tough for Maddie. She made it through without any mishaps but was tempted to quit. Still, she thought better of it, deciding she wasn't quite ready to make that leap. She did, however, summon the courage to take the next 3 days off. After a long, guilt-tripping talk from the foreman, her request was reluctantly granted. She woke up early on Wednesday, took the train from Boston to Salem, and arrived with time to spare at the George Robbie Law offices. As she waited in the ornate lobby, she couldn't help but imagine the wealth that awaited her. She had visited great-uncle Joseph's mansion as a child, and even then, she remembered her eyes growing wide at the sight of the grand home. Finally, an oak door opened, and a dignified, bearded man in his 70s appeared. "Ms. Stone," he said in a deep voice, "I'm George Robbie. It's a pleasure to meet you. Please, come in." Maddie nervously entered the office, acutely aware of how out of place she felt in the presence of this refined and sophisticated man. Without saying a word, she sat down in the queen and chair that Mr. Robbie had indicated. "Now, Ms. Stone. Or may I call you Madeline?" he began. Madeline nodded shyly, though most people only called her Maddie. "How much do you know about your heritage?" Maddie knew very little, just what her brother had told her about great-uncle Joseph's stories. The Stone family supposedly came from a small town in England, with some noble ancestor, though she didn't know his name. She admitted this to Mr. Robbie, feeling a little guilty, but he didn't seem surprised. "No need for you to know much, Madeline. Your great-uncle wasn't exactly progressive by today's standards. He believed in a patriarchal view of family, and that extended to his thoughts on the women's movement." Maddie noticed the way he emphasized women's movement with a hint of disapproval. "In any case," Robbie continued, "though he had no personal issue with you, your gender kept him from being as close to you as he was to your brother. Nevertheless, you are the last surviving member of the Stone family, and it is to you that the bulk of Joseph Stone's wealth is bequeathed." Maddie closed her eyes, struggling to hold back the smile threatening to break free. She managed to contain it, but Robbie's disapproving glance let her know she hadn't hidden it completely. "Now, Ms. Stone, before you get too carried away." Maddie blushed, feeling embarrassed. "I must inform you that certain conditions must be met before the wealth and property can be transferred." Maddie's heart sank as she sat forward, her mind already imagining these conditions as something harrowing, perhaps impossible. "Please, Madeline," Robbie said, noticing her concern, "I can see you're worried about these conditions. Don't fret. I've read them, and while they might seem unusual, they're not particularly difficult. Allow me to read you the will." For the next half hour, Maddie was a mix of confusion and amusement as she listened to her great-uncle's strange conditions. First, she was to be fingerprinted at the office and take an oath of her identity. Though odd, it seemed manageable. Next, she was to take possession of a 100-year-old bottle of port wine and drink a toast to her great-uncle Joseph in front of his portrait at his house. Sentimental, but still doable. The next condition, however, was where things took a strange turn. She was to spend an entire night locked in her great-uncle's house alone, with no one to attend to her. Robbie outlined the instructions clearly. Every window and door, except the front, had already been sealed by a professional team. Upon entering, the final door would also be sealed behind her. Maddie's eyes widened with concern as Robbie spoke. Why would he demand such a thing? For the first time, Robbie's expression softened. "Madeline," he said gently, "your great-uncle anticipated this would worry you, and he insisted I tell you that there is no hidden agenda. No one will be in the house with you, and I assure you, his house is not haunted." Maddie chuckled, thinking he was joking, but when he didn't laugh, she began to doubt whether he was. He continued without missing a beat, revealing the final condition. Apparently, her great-uncle had written a personal letter for her to read after the night in the house. To ensure she stayed the entire night, the letter would be placed in a time-locked safe just before she entered the house, set to open 12 hours later. When she read the letter, Robbie assured her, the peculiar demands of the will would become clear. Robbie set the will aside and looked at Maddie directly. "Do you agree to the conditions, Ms. Stone?" he asked. "I must tell you, if you refuse, the entire estate will be donated to various charities. But if you accept, at noon on Thursday, following your stay, the entirety of your great-uncle's possessions will be transferred to you." Maddie didn't hesitate. What did a few odd conditions matter if it meant a life of luxury? "I accept," she said timidly, the only words she had managed in the past half hour. Maddie followed the instructions carefully, undergoing the fingerprinting process and signing the oath of identity. She then took possession of the bottle of wine, encased in an ornate silver box, and allowed herself to be driven by Robbie's limousine to her great-uncle's grand mansion. They arrived with little ceremony and entered the house. Maddie noticed a construction truck pull up as soon as they stepped inside. Robbie, without much conversation, showed her where the essential items were, bowed in front of the large portrait she was to toast, and led her upstairs to the bedroom. There, he showed her the time-locked safe, retrieving a sealed envelope from his pocket and placing it inside. He set the timer for 12 hours in the future, then closed the safe with a decisive motion and spun the combination. They descended the elegant staircase, and Robbie opened the door. "And now, Ms. Stone, I must take my leave. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in my office, just past noon." He gave her a respectful bow and exited. Not a moment later, Maddie heard the hiss of a welder's torch at the front door. Soon, the only sound in the house was the ticking of the antique clocks. She tried the front door and found it locked. Glancing at her watch, she noted it was just past 7 p.m. Well, she thought, might as well explore my house. Explore she did, finding that her great-uncle had a penchant for dramatic, old-fashioned decor. Everything she looked at seemed ancient, traditional, and a bit eerie. Still, she knew from reputation that such old, traditional things were often quite valuable. At least the phone worked like a modern one, though it did have a faint musty smell. She decided to call Amy, detailing both the house and the strange conditions tied to her inheritance. As always, the two of them had a lively conversation, laughing about Maddie's new fortune and discussing how she wanted to share it with Amy. After hanging up 3 hours later, Maddie felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Amy. She was her only true friend, and now that she was an heiress, Maddie began dreaming of extravagant ways to reward her. After fantasizing about luxury vacations and cruises, Maddie began to feel tired. It was just past 11 p.m., and although she had lit the house to make it feel less cold and impersonal, she still felt uneasy. However, after spending 3 years in foster homes, she was used to feeling uncomfortable and decided she could sleep here. Plus, she recalled that a little wine might help her relax, and since a toast was part of the evening's requirements, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. She retrieved the silver case containing the wine and walked toward the hallway where her great-uncle's portrait hung, the sound of her footsteps echoing eerily in the empty house. She unlocked the case with the key Robbie had given her and removed the dusty bottle. She was surprised to see the label worn off, expecting a vintage worthy of the occasion. Finding a corkscrew in a drawer under the oak bar, she opened the bottle with a quiet sigh and sniffed it. The scent wasn't quite what she expected, but then again, she wasn't a wine expert. She poured a small amount into a crystal glass and gazed at her great-uncle's portrait. It wasn't a bad likeness, and unlike many portraits of wealthy men, he was actually smiling in this one. He looked kind, though still imposing. She raised her glass to him and said, "Here's to you, Uncle Joseph. You've made a girl very happy, and I'll do my best to carry on your good works. Rest in peace, Uncle. I drink to your memory." The wine had a rich, somewhat mysterious taste. Though it wasn't exactly to her liking, it wasn't as unpleasant as she had feared, and she immediately felt its warmth spread through her body. She finished the glass, feeling slightly lightheaded, and walked to the bedroom. Though she had planned to search for a toothbrush before bed, the spinning in her head told her it could wait until morning. She quickly undressed and slipped into a silky nightgown she had packed. Her head now spinning in circles, she crawled into her great-uncle's bed, and, with the excitement of the day finally catching up to her, drifted off to sleep instantly. Maddie had never been much of a dreamer at night, but this time was different. Her dreams were disjointed yet incredibly vivid, all connected by a common theme. Some took place in exotic locations she'd been fantasizing about before bed, while others unfolded within the house itself. Throughout them, she was fixated on a mysterious woman. In each dream, she seemed to be chasing after the woman from an unknown vantage point, and just as she was about to touch her, a new dream would begin. Maddie awoke briefly several times during the night, feeling odd, but exhaustion led her back to sleep each time. In her final dream, she finally caught up with the enigmatic woman. They reached out to each other and embraced in a cliché slow-motion moment. But just as their hands were about to meet, Maddie realized she was seeing the woman from a man's perspective. The arms extended toward the woman were clad in a long-sleeved shirt, golden cufflinks visible under a tweed coat. Her hands seemed much larger than her own and were adorned with men's rings. As their hands clasped together, the dream dissolved into the bright morning light. Maddie awoke feeling refreshed but foggy-headed. As she gradually became fully awake, she heard a click followed by a muffled squeak. The time lock safe had opened. Eager, Maddie moved to get out of bed to see what was inside, but when she twisted to rise, she felt her nightie strain, followed by a loud rip. Looking down, her world shifted. Beneath the torn fabric, a muscular, hairy chest with impressive pectorals and a washboard stomach greeted her eyes. "What the?" she gasped, astonished at the deep masculine voice that came out of her mouth. She reached up, feeling the unfamiliar body, and was horrified to find large, calloused hands rubbing through a forest of chest hair. "I must still be dreaming," she muttered in her new booming voice, pinching herself in an attempt to wake up. The pain from her pinch was unexpectedly intense. Shocked, she ran her hands over her face and cheeks, a cry of distress escaping her lips as she felt the rough stubble of a man's skin. Unable to bear it, Maddie jumped out of bed, noting how much heavier her body felt. Looking down, she saw powerful, hairy legs supporting her. She stumbled toward the mirror by the bed, her movements strange and clumsy. The reflection that met her eyes was that of a very handsome man, about her age, though everything else about him was impossibly different. She tore off the shredded remains of her nightie and gasped in disbelief at the lean, muscular body before her. Even more incredible was the sight of the proud manhood between her legs. In an instinctive move, she reached for it, and to her shock, it immediately grew larger and became erect. Overwhelmed by the new sensations, she let go, still unable to fully comprehend the enormity of the transformation she had undergone. Remembering the letter with all the answers, she shuffled toward the safe. Her movements were slow and awkward, but she managed to reach the envelope. Her large hands fumbled as she ripped it open and read the letter with wide, disbelieving eyes. "My dear Maddie, if all has gone according to my plan, I am dead, and you are reading this with male eyes. I apologize for what I've done, but the Stone family cannot end with me. I have not shared much of our family history, but if you look through the chronicles Robbie will provide, you'll learn that we are descended from noble blood that carries what you would call magic. An ancient mage once took a mate, and his lineage has passed down through the generations. I only discovered its existence through my wealth. Maddie, this family is too important to die out. The prophecies I've found suggest that the stones will play a significant role in future history. Please accept the gifts I've given you. Though I know you'll struggle with your new self, in time, I am certain you'll not only accept it but come to enjoy it. The potion in the wine has made you male, but more importantly, it has made you virile. Soon, its effects will awaken desires you once considered unimaginable, and with your inheritance, you'll be able to fulfill those desires in ways you never thought possible. Robbie has access to all my secrets. When you meet with him, introduce yourself as Kingston Stone and allow your fingerprints to be taken again, they will not have changed. You'll be the sole master of all I now possess. Farewell, Kingston. I rest easy knowing that our line will endure." The letter was signed, Joseph Bartholomew Stone. Maddie, now Kingston, read the letter countless times until now he, was sure it said the same thing. Finally, worn out from the revelations of the morning, he flung himself on the bed. Noting that the absence of chests made it much easier to lie on his stomach. As he lay, a sense of understanding came over him, along with a certain degree of acceptance. He thought about how trivial his life as Madeline Stone had been, and how he could live much better as wealthy and influential Kingston Stone. He reflected back on his dreams the night before, a growing erection again surprising him, as he again took his ultimate new part in his hand, reveling in the sheer specific centered ecstasy of it. The face of his dream lover began to gain clarity, as his body began to spasm with his first male peak. His fantasy woman took a name, shouting with fierce joy as his body convulsed. Intensively, he realized that it was Amy. Amy, Maddie's friend. For life, Amy, Kingston's lover. It was a perfect fit. An overwhelming sense of desire for her hit him as he neared peak. His eyes shut automatically as his peak exploded all over him. His last coherent thought before he was overwhelmed with joy was, why not? Since I'm the last of the line, it's my responsibility to do something about it.